I'm Missy Miculka, the Menopause Midwife. I'm here to break down all the things about menopause and hormones that seem overly complicated, which is pretty much everything. With over 10 years of experience catching babies and 2 decades of intuitive massage therapy practice, I have spent the last few years deep diving into all things menopause to figure out why so many women are suffering and why there seems to be so much confusion about hormones and menopause. Calling on my midwifery experience and my desire to help women attain and maintain full autonomy, I will stay next to you during this life transition and help to explain the options as you step into your power and find optimal health. Hello to all my lovelies in the Menoverse. This is Missy, the Menopause Midwife, and today is Friday, October 4th, 2024. I have got a treat for you today. We might be talking about something totally new to you. Now, I know you've all heard the buzz about GLP-1s out there, otherwise known as the Beverly Hills soccer mom weight loss drug of choice. But did you know that you already have endogenous, which means made inside of your body, GLP-1s? Well, you do. And I have Christina O'Connor here with me today from Pendulum Life to help us understand how we can stimulate this GLP-1 without a shot. Or even if you are using a variety of exogenous, which means made outside the body, GLP-1, how you might choose to support your natural production too. So, before we get into the science, I want to take a moment to introduce Christina. She is currently the Senior Healthcare Account Manager at Pendulum Therapeutics. She's a registered dietitian with a bachelor's from James Madison University and completed her dietetic internship through the Virginia Department of Health. Welcome, Christina.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to
Of
be a guest on your show.
Oh, thank you for joining us today. Before we jump into Pendulum and Akkermansia, which is our focus today, I would love to spend a few moments talking about your previous career in the NICU, where you were instrumental in helping to bring to life one of the area's first human milk donor banks. This is a subject close to my heart. What a beautiful project to have headed up. Can you tell us what your drive was for this?
Oh my goodness, yes. So as you mentioned, I started my career in the NICU as a dietitian. So all of you dietitians out there, if there are any listening, you know that's like a dream job for a dietitian because you have so much say, and you're just like such an integral part of the care team for these fragile little babies. But the NICU is really where I fell in love with the gut microbiome, because premature babies have something that can devastatingly happen to them called necrotizing enterocolitis. And it's actually where part of the bowel dies. And it can be fatal if it's not caught in time. And then some babies that survive have to have part of the bowel resected, meaning, part of the gastrointestinal tract has to be taken out. And they live the rest of their lives this way. So it's a very devastating complication, and neonatologists don't have an answer as to why this happens. But more and more, there's more conversations around. Of course, it's likely related to the gut bacteria within the baby's microbiome. On this understanding that the gut microbiome has such an impact in so many different aspects of our health. The effects are just far reaching. And then at the same time, I also saw, what human milk could do for the health of the GI tract. I mean, it's like the most perfect food that exists on the planet. And it's, perfectly made and designed for each baby. from their mom. Just like what a beautiful relationship. And so we had the opportunity to start that donor milk bank so that we could service our area, but then also our own premature babies in our NICU. And it was, so it took a whole team of really dedicated nurses and neonatologists and dietitians to really get that donor milk bank off the ground. But it's still servicing our community and the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters to this very day. So
it's so beautiful. I had personal experience with that with a dear friend, and then who needed that because she sadly passed away a few days after her baby was born, and actually didn't use a donor bank, but used a mom in the community nursed her baby until she was ready to wean. And that to me is, the beauty of all of this. And so you were just able to bring it to more women and babies who really needed it. And then, just to address the microbiome with that, when I had my babies and they were younger and my group of mommy friends, we all would babysit each other's friends so we could go for a run or get some, have a bath or do something. And we would nurse each other's babies on purpose. We had talked about it as being really important for our kiddos' microbiomes to expand them and make them more, have more variety. And so I love just all of that. That human milk is such a beautiful, precious commodity, I think. And so thank you for doing that beautiful work. It's great.
yes.
Well, let's get back to the science. I'd love to everyone to put on your thinking caps because we're gonna go and pack in a bunch of information about this. We're gonna kind of go through a lot. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Christina. Pendulum has some amazing resources on their website too. I'm learning today too, so let's get in and enjoy this. So I've been carrying Pendulum for a couple of years myself, and I'm excited to introduce their products to my audience and then learn more for myself. And first, a little background, though, on Pendulum. It's the only probiotic company that's been funded by the Mayo Clinic. Dr. Peter Attia, who wrote Outlive, you might have heard of him, touts the benefits of Pendulum, and the company was started by 3 PhD scientists. And last but not least, they're the only probiotic that Halle Berry uses because they actually work for her. And a little more on her later because I do want to shine the light for just a moment on her work on menopause funding at a federal level. So now that you know about the famous friends Pendulum has, Christina, can you tell us what the heck Akkermansia actually is? Is it a probiotic, a prebiotic, a postbiotic, or something entirely different? And why would anyone, specifically peri and menopausal women, want to consider adding it to their personal apothecary?
Oh my gosh, great question. Okay, so it's a very unique organism. And just sort of to tie it back to the birthing process and newborn babies, this is an organism that you cannot get from your environment. So you're not going to find it in your yogurt. You're not going to find it digging in the soil. It is one that, in a perfect world, is being passed from mom, if mom has it, along to baby, because we know it's found in the guts of breastfed infants, but then it's also found in the guts of centenarians. So those folks who have longevity on their side, that are living to be 100+ years old and living a healthy lifestyle, they have adequate levels of Akkermansia as well. So this organism has been coined as a keystone strain. So it's one that we're supposed to have within the human gut microbiome. Why is it missing in so many of us? We can dive into that a little bit later. But it's supposed to make up anywhere between 1 and 4% of our gut microbiome. And just to sort of set the stage of like what the gut microbiome is and what's in there are literally trillions of different organisms that are living within the gut. And if Akkermansia is making up, almost 4% of that, that tells you that it's in there to a large degree, and it has a very, very important role.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that it took up that much of the microbiome. That's incredible. So what is it a prebiotic, a postbiotic, what actually is Akkermansia?
Yeah, great question. So it is a probiotic. So
Okay.
that means that it's a living organism, and it has benefits for us as the host. So you can think of the human body is a host to these organisms. But another thing that makes Akkermansia unique, and part of the reason why you're not finding it in your yogurt and you're not finding it in the dirt, is because it's an anaerobic bacteria. And so that means that it cannot be in the presence of oxygen. So it lives in the colon, and your colon is oxygen free. So up until recently, there hasn't been a way to grow this organism in a lab and then be able to scale it and manufacture it and then encapsulate it and bring it to the marketplace so that it's available for us to use in supplement form. Historically, you've just had like your lactobacillus and your bifidobacteria available in probiotics, which are all really great and have amazing benefits. But we're on kind of a new frontier with these organisms that are anaerobic. And they have, just like I mentioned, very specific things that they do within the gut.
So you did mention too, as we started, that some people don't have it in their gut. Does that mean that they just have a really low level or they don't have it at all?
It depends. Some people will have just a really low level, and then for some folks, it's gone missing completely. And there
Wow.
are a couple of different reasons why that happens. A lot of different reasons, actually. If you have low levels of your own Akkermansia, you can actually increase the Akkermansia that lives in your gut by feeding it what it needs. And it needs very specifically polyphenols. That's the energy source of Akkermansia. And so you can increase your own natural levels by consuming foods that are high in polyphenols, like pomegranates or red grape seed. Green tea is also really high in polyphenols. Red wine, chocolate, they have polyphenols as well.
So so that's really interesting to me, the polyphenol part, because as you know, what I've been taught for years, and maybe this is now there's new science behind it, I'm not sure. But with a probiotic, you need to feed it with your prebiotic. And so you're saying feed this probiotic with a polyphenol, which is a different substance altogether. Is that accurate? That it's
Yeah,
just different
absolutely.
for Akkermansia?
Yes, absolutely. So, there are, yes, a lot of organisms feed on prebiotics, and we actually do have some prebiotics in a lot of our probiotic formulations. But for Akkermansia, it's a very unique strain, and we can go into sort of its mechanism of action when you're ready. But its energy source is very specifically polyphenols.
Interesting. Okay. And when people have, could you give us just touch on it lightly why people might have less or no Akkermansia? What reason is
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, so if you're not consuming polyphenols as part of a healthy diet, the levels will start to decrease, and it can eventually just sort of die off if
Mm.
it's not being fed properly. But then we have the obvious things like antibiotic use, even a course of pharmaceuticals for whatever reason. If you have to take a pharmaceutical, that can have a negative impact on your gut microbiome. Stress, travel,
Mhm.
changes throughout the life cycle. So when women start to go through menopause and even perimenopause, the gut microbiome changes, and sometimes we lose certain organisms as a result of those changes as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to talk about the mechanism of action in just a little bit. If you do have akkermansia, how can you tell?
Yeah, so Akkermansia has been associated with being able to maintain a healthy weight. So you don't struggle with being overweight, or, if you need to shed a few pounds, you're able to do so easily. And also lowered inflammation. Akkermansia is associated with being able to help support the gut barrier and reduce inflammation that's being caused by intestinal permeability. So you may have heard of like leaky gut, and so Akkermansia helps with that as well.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, no, that's really helpful because there are people who struggle really hard. They do every diet on the planet and the weight is stubborn. And so those people might be more you might assume that they might have that going on, a little lower akkermansia in their gut.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
well, and then so that kind of begs the question on the other end for me, just like anything in the gut, if you get an overgrowth, there can be some side effects that maybe some gas and bloating, things like that. Have you experienced anything or heard of anything like that with akkermansia?
That's a great question, because it really is all about balance within the gut microbiome. And our founder and CEO is one of our scientists, Dr. Colleen Cutcliffe. I've heard her say, and I agree, that there aren't really any bad organisms. It's just when certain organisms get out of balance. So whatever reason, we've had to use a course of antibiotics, and that upsets the balance. And then you have certain organisms that are in greater number that really shouldn't be. So Akkermansia is one of those organisms that really helps to restore balance and restore homeostasis within the gut microbiome. But I think it is also important, if you're taking probiotics, to cycle your probiotics and take, diversity is the name of the game when it comes to the gut microbiome. So it's important to, take a strain. If you benefit from it, then that's great. And then maybe take a break and take something else. And you can always come back to an organism if you feel like you need to revisit it, or, you've had to take antibiotics or pharmaceuticals for some reason. You can always come back to a strain and revisit it, especially if you've had positive results in the past.
Absolutely. I agree with that so much. Like we were talking about with breastfeeding each other's babies, it's creating diversity in that microbiome. So I think that's wonderful. And just because Akkermansia is a keystone strain, it's really important that we at least have a base of that. So I know, and I always want to tell people, a lot of people think, well, if one is good, a handful is better. And that's not always the case with anything. And it's definitely not the case with probiotics, in my opinion. I think if one is good, then let's build on that foundation and see what we can do to add in some diversity along the way. So,
Yes.
and that, just since we're here with that, when bringing up the one versus a handful, what is the general dosing recommendation or thought about Akkermansia? How much a day?
Yeah, so what we know, in terms of like how much you should be taking, we know because of the clinical study that we did on our Akkermansia product. It's actually called Glucose Control, and it contains Akkermansia as well as some other butyrate producing organisms. So again, when you're talking about diversity, I really love our multi-strain products because, again, you're not taking just one strain, you're
Mhm.
taking multi-strain product. And all of those organisms, they all work really well together to help each other, to help, repair the gut, to help support each other, and to help restore balance. But we know from our clinical study, our glucose control product happens to be 2 billion AFUs. And so we measure in active fluorescent units. We can go into that if you want. But it's 2 billion AFUs per day of that particular product. And it contains 500 million AFUs of Akkermansia. And that was a safe and also therapeutic dose, because in that study, we were looking at type 2 diabetics. And the patients that took the glucose control formula, they were able to lower their A1C and also their postprandial glucose spikes. So postprandial glucose spikes are just that after meal spike in blood glucose.
Awesome. Wow. That's so would those people or was the recommendation or the thought during the clinical studies, was that one capsule a day or was there more?
It was actually 2 capsules per
Okay.
day, and that gave you the 2 billion AFUs.
Okay. All right. And were those taken at the same time?
They were actually taken, separately, so 1 in the morning and then 1 at night, with food.
Okay. Yeah, and just because we're there, I mean, I think we've kind of jumped ahead and we'll go back through the benefits of GLP-1s and what that means as it relates to Akkermansia. But I just want to, I love dosing stuff. I love to know the whys and the hows. And one thing that I've always learned is with your probiotics to take them at night because your gastric movement is slower. And so there's a little more, shall we say, exposure to your gut as it's getting down there. Is that a similar belief with Pendulum products?
So I'm not sure, but I do know that they're in a time released capsule.
Oh,
And
okay.
so and it's also an acid resistant capsule. So like we mentioned, Akkermansia is doing its function in the colon. And so we want them to make their way down there. So the recommendation with food is just to protect the acid resistant capsule, and then they're time released. So they are going to go through the small intestines and then open up, and release as they get closer to the colon. But I like that recommendation of taking them at night. You know, I do recommend, like, when folks have to take a course of antibiotics, to take a probiotic at the same time, not exactly at the same time, but your antibiotics during the day and your probiotics at night, because we know that our bodies are healing at night. So they're restoring, and our cells are cleaning, and a lot of that good stuff happens at night. And so I do love to take probiotics at night, to especially when they're helping to repair and heal the gut, which a lot of these strains are doing.
Absolutely. Okay, so I know I got off track there with where we were. I'm going to grab my notes so I don't forget and get off track again because
Sounds great.
I'm really good at that. Um, let's dive into the mechanism of action if you don't mind and help people kind of understand like what is this Akkermansia thing and why how does it relate to GLP-1? Why do we keep talking about these two things? Are they the same? Are they different? What are they
Yeah.
from the kindergartner's view?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to take you to the gut barrier. So that's where we are right now. So if you can imagine, the gut barrier is an area where it's semi-permeable. So some things are allowed in and some things are allowed out, but not all things. So we need water and nutrients, and those types of things to be able to pass through freely. But what we don't want sneaking through, and when I say sneaking through, I mean sneaking through the gut wall and ending up into our systemic circulation, right? So that's like the whole body, the circulatory system. What we don't want getting through is things like toxins. And we also don't want opportunistic and pathogenic bugs to be able to sneak through. So it's important to have a strong barrier to keep certain things in their locations, in their places. And so Akkermansia and these butyrate producing organisms, that are in a lot of the Pendulum products, they really have two main functions. One is to help restore the gut, heal the gut, restore the barrier. and the other is butyrate production. And so butyrate really relates to the GLP-1 hormone. So we'll go into that in just a second, but we'll stick with the gut barrier for just a minute more. So Akkermansia has a very, I think, strange and unique job within the gut barrier. So you have what's called a mucus layer that lives on top of the epithelial cells. And I almost think of it as like fly paper, because stuff, it comes to get stuck in there. So all of those toxins and those pathogenic and opportunistic bugs, they should be getting caught up in that mucus layer and not be able to make their way into systemic circulation. So Akkermansia, this mucus layer turns over about every 7 days. Akkermansia lives in that mucus layer, and it actually eats and degrades old, worn out mucin or mucus. And as it does that, our goblet cells in the gut, they get the message, oh, it's time to produce a new, fresh layer of mucus. You know, the old stuff has been sloughed off, it's been eaten, it's gone away, and now it's time to produce a new, fresh layer of mucus. So you prevent the mucus layer from being thin and patchy and worn out in certain areas, which is a perfect place for those toxins and pathogenic bugs to sneak through. The other thing that these organisms do in terms of the gut barrier is they help to tighten the junctions between the cells. So there's like a gap, right, in between each and every single cell. You can think of it as like the panels on a fence, on like your fence post. You want those fence posts to be nice and strong, right? You have a fence for a reason. It's keeping certain things out, and it's keeping certain things in your yard, just keeping them in the yard. You want those junctions, those gap junctions, to be nice and tight. I call this barrier number 2. So the mucus layer is barrier number 1, and then the tight junctions, that's barrier number 2. And so a lot of these organisms that are in the products also help to tighten up those junctions and keep certain things out. And so the second mechanism of action, or sort of the second thing that these strains are doing, is they're producing butyrate. And butyrate is what's known as a short chain fatty acid. And short chain fatty acids are incredible for our health and for our gut. They're something that we really want to have being produced within the gut microbiome. But for our purposes at Pendulum, we've really been looking at what is the role of butyrate in metabolism. And so these organisms, we put them into like a little category or a bucket, and they are butyrate producers. So when we consume fiber, and fiber is like a really important part of a healthy diet that supports diversity in the gut microbiome. When we consume fiber, these butyrate producing organisms ferment the fiber that we're eating. And the result of that fermentation process is butyrate. Butyrate, if you're following me, I know this is like really long, but butyrate has the ability to turn on your GLP-1 hormone naturally. So GLP-1 is supposed to be made in the gut. And a lot of people, we're hearing so much about GLP-1 and we don't really even know sometimes like what it is or what it does. But if you think about your gas tank when you go to fill up your car, it has, if you get a pump that's working properly, it has like a little lever that you can just pull up and you can allow it to fill your tank and it will shut off when it's full. GLP-1 hormone is kind of like that. When we're eating and we're full and we get those signals that like, okay, you can turn off the gas pump now because we're full. GLP-1 is kind of like that. So these organisms in the gut are very specifically helping your body to make its own natural GLP-1.
That's awesome. I know, I mean, we kind of got in the science weeds there, but my listeners are smart and they're going to be able to follow along. And if they can't, we can help break it down even more. So I hope if you guys have any questions, you'll ask. I always like to think of it as, I love the gas tank analogy, actually. That is just fantastic. So the Akkermansia and the butyrate work together to help you create your very own GLP-1 in your gut. So that's kind of the very, very, very super duper short version of it. So if you, by taking the Akkermansia that is beautifully blended with the butyrate, then you increase what you already naturally have of the GLP-1. And actually, can we dive into how might that work with someone who is maybe already using a GLP-1 agonist in a like an injection form?
So, like I mentioned, GLP-1 is really released and associated with, when we're eating, right? So it's supposed to rise and fall. So GLP-1 levels are supposed to be rising and they're falling. So after you've had a meal and you're full, GLP-1 says we're full and we don't need to put any more gas in the gas tank. When you're taking an injection, you're getting GLP-1 all day, every day. So you're telling your body, I just ate, I'm full, I don't need any more food. I just ate, I'm full, I don't need any more food. That's the signal that you're getting all day, every day, 24/7. Instead of like the normal way that GLP-1 works is I'm hungry, I need food, I ate, I'm full, I don't need to eat anymore until, it's just like a cycle. It's going up and down. So when you're taking the GLP-1 drug and you're losing weight, it's a really great time to actually go on the back end and fix what might be missing in the gut. So giving your body back the tools that it needs to do these functions on its own. Because once you stop the injections, if you haven't done anything or you haven't changed anything, then you're still the same person that you were before you took the GLP-1 drugs. So there's a high likelihood that those food cravings that maybe you had a hard time with before you started taking the injections, or for whatever reason, weight loss did not come easily. All of those issues are still going to exist once you stop the medication, unless you've done something differently. So it's a great time to address diet, lifestyle, healing the gut, restoring the balance, and giving your body back the tools that it needs to perform these jobs of metabolism and make your own GLP-1.
What I'm hearing you say is that while you're even on the drug, you can add in the probiotic to just support that system so that as you wean off, you're already supported so that you're not weaning off and you have nothing left that's natural in there or
Yes,
endogenous.
absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. And so a lot of the providers that we work with here at Pendulum, that's how they're using our probiotic along, side the injections that they're giving to their patients.
I love that option because I have a lot of clients who come to me and they're like, I'm on this and I don't want to get off it because I'm scared to get off of it because I don't want that weight gain again. And then they also, what they really don't want is the food noise. And can you address that with the product?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of times we think that our food cravings are just a lack of willpower, right? Like some people just totally give up. Like, I'll never be able to lose the weight because I can't resist my food cravings. And what I think that a lot of folks don't understand is that it might not have anything to do with a lack of willpower, and it may have more to do with the organisms that are in your gut. So there is a super highway that exists between the gut and the brain. And it's called the vagus nerve. And it's two nerves that go right here alongside on the neck. And it goes all the way down to the gut and it goes all the way up to the brain. So when your gut is in dysbiosis, it's not in balance. You have sort of those opportunistic bacteria that are in abundance in the gut microbiome. Sometimes they need, like Akkermansia needs polyphenols these particular organisms maybe need things like sugar or refined carbohydrates. And so they're sending signals to the brain, hey, we're in charge here, and we need to survive. Therefore, these are the foods that we are requesting. And so it's not even you, right? It's these bugs, which is kind of scary, living in your gut that are driving those food choices. So when you start to restore balance and you bring back these organisms that are feeding on things like polyphenols and fiber, then your food cravings start to change. And it's really like the number one thing that we hear from patients that are taking the Pendulum products, and they're almost shocked by it. The testimonials are hilarious. People will write in and say things like, I enjoyed eating a salad today. Or, I'm finding myself reaching for fruits and vegetables as a snack, and I've never done that before. Or, I can eat 2 cookies now and walk away. I no longer feel like the cookie monster. And so that's huge. Just by changing the organisms in the gut, you're able to change your cravings.
Absolutely. Oh, that is so encouraging. I can't, and I did have a client who asked me a specific question. She knew I was having this interview with you today, and she said she's on the GLP-1 drug for diabetes and pre-diabetes, and that's all under control now. And so she's on the lowest dose, but she's kind of topped out and she's hit a plateau. She doesn't really want to take more of that in order to lose the weight, but she wouldn't mind losing a few more pounds. And so, I mean, I think you kind of already answered the question. She can jump on, add that Akkermansia back in on the back end and see if that gives. Do you find that it sometimes will give a little boost to people who have kind of plateaued?
Yeah, my mom is that exact situation. So she was hovering right around the type 2 range. And before I started working at Pendulum, I found out about their glucose control product. And so I recommended it to her. I said, Mom, before you do anything, you need to try this product. Let's see if we can get this under control through diet and lifestyle and supplements. And her response to me was, well, insurance will pay for metformin, and that glucose control is really expensive, so I'm gonna go the metformin route. So, okay. Metformin really bothered her stomach, she couldn't tolerate it. She ended up on Trulicity, which she did really well on. She lost weight. She was able to get control over her food cravings. And of course, her numbers started to trend in the right direction. Fast forward a little bit. I'm working for Pendulum now, so we have access to the glucose control. So she started taking it. She plateaued with her weight loss, right? Her numbers weren't coming down. She wasn't losing any more weight just with the medications alone. When we added the glucose control, she started losing weight again. And now they've actually reduced the amount of medication that she's on twice. So
Wow.
it's worked for her really well. And she's been on it for about 6 months. And we don't have any intentions of stopping until we sort of get to that goal.
I love that for all of the people out there. All I could think about when you were talking about the food noise was these little bugs in your gut reaching for the Oreo sleeve. You know?
Literally, they
Yeah.
drive your food choices. I think the first time I heard that, I was like, wow, that's really creepy. Like you think you're
Yeah.
in control, but you're not.
We know that the microbes are really in control, and it is the more you learn about it, the more you realize that, and it is a little creepy. So the combination of the three strains, the Akkermansia, the Clostridium, and the butyric acid, Clostridium butyric. Sorry, these words are all crazy, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to look at them, they're like this long. And they're really fun to say. Um, I did have a client write to me and she said, I really want to try that, what is it, necromancia? And I was like, oh no, I know what you mean. But she couldn't remember what it was called. And so that's what she wrote.
That's
Cracked
hilarious.
me up. So the Akkermansia, the Clostridium butyricum and the
Fan-
bifidobacterium. Those
Yep.
three are kind of this like beautiful trio. Are they in each of the Ackermans, each of the Pendulum products, or are they only in the glucose control?
Great question. So they are in all of our products.
Okay.
And if you, just to sort of simplify the products that are out there, the glucose control that we've sort of been talking a little bit about here, that's the one that I mentioned that has the clinical study tied to it in patients that have type 2. That's our flagship, the product that we launched with. And it contains the highest level of Akkermansia, these additional butyrate producing strains, and then the B infantis, like you mentioned. So it's a total of 5 strains at the highest level. That product is also a little pricey, and it has to be refrigerated and it has to be cold chain shipped. And so for that reason, we saw early on that there was a need to create products that were less expensive and more accessible. Also, if we could, make them shelf stable. And so that's exactly what we did. With the GLP-1, it's just a less potent version of the glucose control. It's not all 5 of the strains, it's just instead 3 of the most powerful butyrate producers that are in the glucose control. So specifically the Akkermansia, like you mentioned, the Clostridium butyricum, and then the Bifidobacterium infantis. And then we have a third product, which is the Metabolic Daily. And that's all of the same 5 strains that are in the glucose control, but just in a less potent version. So you just have some variations in potency, and then a few variations in exactly what strains are in which products.
So if money is no object, grab the glucose control for sure. That's like the top of the line.
Yeah.
And then if money is, or if you're because if you're like me, you have a whole apothecary of things that you choose from, and you have to choose what you're going to buy this month or next month. Then you would go for which one would be kind of like the step down from the glucose control. I'm sorry, I was paying attention, but now I can't remember the names of everything.
It's very confusing. So the glucose control is at the top, and then next in line is the GLP-1, and
Okay.
then after that is the metabolic daily.
So
Yeah,
this
that's the
one, folks,
GLP-1.
yeah, that's the one. And this is the professional um bottling. It looks a little different if you buy it off the website, but if you get it from a professional like myself or someone else, then you're gonna get this bottle. And can you tell us, just address really quick, the difference between the pro and the not pro versions?
Yeah. Generally speaking, a lot of the formulations are the same. So for the GLP-1, it's the same formulation. However, in the professional bottle, those products have a 2-year shelf life compared to the 1-year shelf life of the retail products. The professional products also come in that desiccant lined bottle. So that completely seals out any moisture, which is why they last longer. Moisture is what activates the strains. So it's really important that they stay dry. You never want to take these capsules out of their bottles and put them into a pill case. And so the professional bottles just again help it to last longer, and they preserve that viability and that potency. And then there are a couple of exclusive products to the professional line. So there's a Metabolic Daily Pro, which is a stronger formula, and then the Akkermansia 500 Pro is a stronger Akkermansia single strain. That's it.
Um, all right. That is so helpful. I feel like I understand it all a lot better now. Um, do you have any, are there any products coming up? Anything new coming this way? Any studies that you want to share with us?
Yeah, some really cool studies. So studies, if you don't know already, studies are really expensive to do and to launch. And so we've had some others approach us that wanted to study our products and study our strains. And so we support those studies. And whatever the outcome, we support it with product. But some of the ones that are currently underway, we have one in bipolar depression 1 and 2. with the glucose control product. So we talked a little bit about that gut-brain axis. There is so much that's going on there. And a lot of these strains, like Akkermansia, has been associated with GABA production. And GABA, if you don't know, has been associated with feelings of calm and reduced anxiety. And so Akkermansia is being studied for that. We also have a study that's underway in obesity, and then we also have one in postmenopausal osteoporosis.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. We talked about a little earlier before we started recording a slide that somebody at Pendulum has made that helps to relate how the gut microbiome works and Akkermansia specifically with hormones and how we metabolize our hormones. Can you touch on that?
Yes, I can. Okay, so it's something called this is a new phrase, at least it's new to me. It's called the estrobolome. And that's a network of over 60 general bacteria. Okay, we're gonna get a little sciencey here. And they produce certain enzymes and byproducts that are capable of breaking down and recycling estrogens. So there are specific bacteria strains within the gut microbiome that, again, that are producing these particular enzymes, specifically called beta glucuronidase. So an imbalance within the gut microbiome can cause actually an excess or a deficit in these beta glucuronidase organisms or enzymes. And that actually impacts the balance of estrogen. So when you have reduced beta glucuronidase activity, that leads to low circulating estrogen. And some of the symptoms that come along with low estrogen include irregular periods, hot flashes, osteoporosis, UTIs, muscle loss, mood changes. But then when we have increased beta glucuronidase producing bacteria, we have elevated circulating estrogen. And that can lead to weight gain, heavy menstrual periods, exhaustion, mood swings, anxiety, hair loss. So it just makes us understand, or just to like put a bow on this, that the gut microbiome and the balance of organisms that exist within the gut are directly related to production of female hormones. I mean, there's just like so many different aspects of our health that the gut touches, but this one is included.
I love that we're now acknowledging the estrobolome. And I think I don't know if it comes from estrogen and microbiome. I feel like that's a word that they've smushed together. And I've been hearing it for about a year now. And it's starting to gain some traction. And I think we're going to be learning a lot more about it in the future. And if you want, I can probably just shoot you a copy of it on an email, or hit me up on Instagram and we'll get it to you for sure. And as a teaser for an upcoming episode, I'd love to circle back to Halle Berry's endorsement of Pendulum and her advocacy for legislation. Now, listen up to this. All right. This legislation, if it passes, would put $275 million towards research and education around menopause. I can't wait to learn more about this legislation and share more with you. Christina, do you have any insights about where this legislation is to date and what's shaken with that?
I don't have any updates from her, but her story is really cool. And I love that she is getting out there and shaking things up when it comes to awareness with menopause and just, women going through these changes. Her story with Pendulum is a really cool one, and it's a very organic story. Pendulum did not go out and hire Halle Berry to talk about our products or, be our spokesperson. She, for those of you that don't know, has struggled with diabetes since like her early 20s. And she was on a journey, on a path to heal her body. And she came across Pendulum and had really great results with the products and with the strains. She has some connections. She's from Ohio, so she has some connections with the Cleveland Clinic Clinic. And so the products were recommended to her through a physician at the Cleveland Clinic. And so as a result of her success and her, her improved health, it helped her lower her A1C and her glucose spikes. Then she really got involved with the company and became our chief communications officer and an investor in the company. So she's actually played a really big role in helping to spread the word that you can take control of your health. You can do things to help your body to heal.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. I know sometimes it takes a famous person or people to get the notice out there. And so we'll take what we can get to get heard and to get seen, especially women in the peri and menopausal space, because we are so often not heard and not seen. I literally yesterday had a woman in for a hormone consult, and she is an educated, smart woman who works at our university here in Missoula. And she went in for all her annual, and she was having all kinds of menopausal symptoms, and the doctor didn't offer her anything but a little bit of lubricant for her vagina. That was it. Not even a vaginal estrogen or anything. And I said, well, did you want to ask her about hormones? She goes, no. She goes, it was clearly a lost cause. And so we can't say it enough. It keeps happening. Yes, there are some doctors and practitioners out there who are starting to help women, but it's few and far between. And so we got to keep banging the drum. So I appreciate Halle Berry for banging the drum from her platform, because she gets heard. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Well, Christina, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. Is there anything else you want to share before we go?
No, I mean, I sort of want to echo that because I agree. And there's just a lot of miseducation out there, and I think that, women don't understand that. I, for the longest time, just thought that, like, oh, you have to live with whatever your period symptoms are, that's just you. And didn't realize that that's an imbalance in your hormones. And so I'm sort of on this journey of giving your body back the tools that it needs to do the functions that it's supposed to do, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's just very basic, and I don't think that we have to complicate it. And I've taken some of your recommendations from some of your supplements and just like feel really good about that. And they've worked, and they've been really helping. So thank you to you, and I hope that
You.
this was helpful to your audience.
Well, I am certain that my audience is learning a ton, and if your eyes aren't crossing, then you really kept up. The last question for my audience is, where can you get Pendulum? Well, you can go to pendulumlife.com, so Pendulum life.com, and you can use code Missy, Missy, for 20% off all of your first orders. And if you're in Missoula, you can just swing by my studio and pick it up. Thank you, and be well. Thank you for joining me here today on the Menopause Midwife. If you'd like more information or to work with me, feel free to check out my website and book a wellness consultation at ohm406.com. Be well.